Every night, Ngozi knelt at their graves, her sobs piercing the silence of the village. "Ada, please forgive me," she wept, her voice raw with sorrow. "I should have been there when you needed me the most. Mama, I'm sorry. I should never have left when I did." Her grief became a heavy chain, dragging her deeper into despair. She stopped seeing the world as it was. She convinced herself that she was to blame. A month passed, yet the wound remained fresh. Whenever she walked through the village, the whispers followed her. "Poor Ngozi, she still hasn't recovered." They remembered her as the vibrant, spirited woman who once turned heads in Abazu, the neighboring village. Men adored her, women envied her, and even the elders spoke of her beauty and wit. But now, she was a shadow of herself. One evening, she sat beneath the old mango tree, Ada's favorite spot. The memories came rushing back. Every laughter, every shared secret, every unspoken promise. She sobbed, her body shaking until suddenly she stopped. Her tears dried, her jaw tightened, and realization settled in like a raging storm. Kelvin. He was the reason for her suffering. A new fire ignited in her chest, hot, vengeful, all-consuming. She had traveled to Lagos once before, seeking justice. But this time, justice was not enough. This time she would not fail. This time, Kelvin would not live to betray another soul. She stormed into her room, her movements sharp with purpose. The same determination that had fueled her survival now pushed her towards something darker. By nightfall, she grabbed the briefcase, the stolen money, the very thing that had started it all, and left Umuofia behind. Her destination, Abazu village. Abazu was where she could be whoever she wanted to be, where no one asked questions, where she could move in silence. She arrived at the local bar, the air thick with palm wine and secrets. This was not just a place of laughter and drunken songs. It was where men of power lurked, where whispers of dark dealings slipped between cracked lips. Ngozi was not there for wine. She leaned in close to the bartender, her voice low but firm. "I need the strongest native doctor." She would have her revenge, even if it meant losing her soul. The village of Abazu was home to a feared and powerful native doctor known as Dibia Agu. His name was never spoken aloud, for it was said that he communed with the gods face to face. He dwelled deep within the heart of the evil forest, a place shrouded in darkness and death. To seek him out was to gamble with one's life, for his sanctuary would only reveal itself to those it deemed worthy or doomed. Ngozi had gathered all the knowledge she needed to execute her plan. At the first light of dawn, she prepared herself. A red wrapper clung tightly around her chest. A single leaf rested between her lips, and in her hands, she carried a calabash. Barefoot, she stepped into the evil forest, knowing that her journey was one of no return. The forest was alive with whispers and unseen eyes. Hours passed under the merciless sun, and still there was no sign of Dibia Agu's dwelling. The ground beneath her feet was cruel. Sharp thorns pierced her skin, and the scorching heat burned her soles. Tears welled in her eyes, but she dared not stop. She could not drop the calabash, nor remove the leaf from her mouth. Mama Ifegu had warned her of the consequences. "You must keep moving, Ngozi," Mama Ifegu's voice echoed in her mind. "If you wish to have your revenge, you must endure. If you stop, you will perish." The sun began to set, casting eerie shadows across the forest floor. Fear clawed at her chest, but a deeper terror drove her forward, the thought of dying here without fulfilling her vengeance. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her body weakened, and still she trudged on. Far away, in a place unseen, Mama Ifegu, who was feared for her own cruelty, pleaded before Dibia Agu, asking that Ngozi be allowed to find him before nightfall. Ngozi's legs trembled and her vision blurred. Desperation took hold. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, and prayed, not to the gods, but to the spirit of her mother. "Mother, guide me." Her mother's words of faith surfaced in her mind, a whisper of strength in the darkness. When she opened her eyes, the hut stood before her. It was massive, standing alone in the middle of nowhere, an eerie sanctuary untouched by time. Summoning the last of her strength, she stumbled forward, crossing the threshold. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of herbs and ancient magic. Seated before her, wrapped in dark robes, was Dibia Agu. His eyes held the weight of knowledge beyond human understanding. "Sit, my child," he said in a voice that sent shivers down her spine. "I already know why you are here." Ngozi swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "You seek vengeance," Dibia Agu continued. Kelvin, the man responsible for the death of your mother and sister. You want him dead." Ngozi clenched her fists. "Yes, Papa," she said, her voice unwavering. "I want him to pay." Dibia Agu nodded and reached for something beside him. He held up a waist bead, its dull glow pulsing like a heartbeat. "Wear this," he instructed. "When Kelvin lies with you, his life will be forfeit." Ngozi recoiled. "No," she whispered. "I cannot, after what he did to me, I cannot give myself to him." Dibia Agu's gaze remained steady. "Revenge comes at a price, child. If you truly desire justice, you must be willing to do what is necessary." Silence stretched between them. Ngozi's hands trembled as she stared at the waist bead. The weight of her decision crushed her, but the faces of her mother and sister burned in her mind. She took a deep breath, her tears drying. "I will do it." Clutching the bead tightly, she rose and left the shrine, stepping back into the night. Meanwhile, Kelvin Hiob, once a man who thrived on excess, parties, women, and reckless abandon, he had now found success in discipline. His last encounter with Ngozi had left an imprint on him, a lesson carved deep into his soul. He had promised himself never to hurt another woman again. And though he had tried to move forward, he couldn't shake the regret of losing Ngozi before he could tell her how much he truly cared. Meanwhile, in the quiet of a small village hotel, Ngozi lay awake long into the night, her thoughts a raging storm. By morning, she had made up her mind. Kelvin had to die. He had caused her too much pain, and she would be the one to end it. She arrived in Lagos the next day and checked into a hotel Kelvin had frequented in the past. She waited, watching, but he never came. By the third day, impatience burned inside her. If Kelvin wouldn't come to her, she would go to him. Dressed in a striking red gown, she stood by the gates of his mansion, a briefcase filled with the money she had once stolen from him in her grasp. It was her key, her way in. Luck favored her that evening. Kelvin returned home earlier than usual, and the moment his eyes landed on her, his face lit up with surprise and joy. He stepped out of his car, walking toward her with urgency. "Ngozi," he breathed as though he had just seen a ghost. "I'm so sorry for the last time. I tried to find you, but I couldn't get your number from anyone. Please, I never meant to hurt you." Ngozi forced a smile, playing along. She needed him to let his guard down. "I shouldn't have taken your money. Two wrongs don't make a right," she murmured, lowering her gaze. Kelvin exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. "Come inside," he said gently. "Let's talk." Inside the house, he was eager to know more about her, about the sister she had mentioned in the letter she left behind. Kelvin, once a man who had lost count of the women he had hurt, had been transformed by his encounter with Ngozi. She was the ghost of his past, and now he wanted to make things right. Ngozi sat across from him, her mind set on her plan. She had rehearsed every step, every word. Kelvin poured her a drink, his eyes warm with curiosity. "I want to know your story, Ngozi. Who was your sister?" Ngozi placed the briefcase on the table, pushing it toward him. "This is your money," she said. But Kelvin shook his head. "I don't care about the money. You are more important to me. I wish you had met me when I was a better man. Back then I was blinded by my past and I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I hurt you, and for that I am truly sorry." She hesitated, then began to speak. She told him everything, how her sister had suffered because of him, how their mother had been destroyed by grief. But she left out the most crucial detail, that her sister, Ada, was dead. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke, her voice trembling. It wasn't entirely an act. There was truth in her pain. Kelvin watched her, stricken. He fell to his knees before her. "Please, forgive me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I need to beg Ada's forgiveness. I need to make things right." Ngozi wiped her tears quickly, masking her expression. "Ada is abroad now," she lied, "but I will speak to her. I'll tell her you're sorry." Kelvin nodded as if relieved and stood. "Let me make you dinner," he said, disappearing into the kitchen. A short while later, he led her upstairs. "There's a hot bath ready for you," he said softly. Ngozi stepped into the steaming water, letting herself relax, but her mind raced. She had expected him to drag her to bed, to lose himself in her like before, but he hadn't, and that unsettled her. When she came downstairs, she found a feast waiting. Kelvin pulled out a chair for her, smiling. Every time their eyes met, there was something unspoken between them, something deeper than the games they were playing. The night flowed easily, filled with laughter and conversation. For a moment, it felt almost magical. When it was time for bed, Kelvin led her to his master bedroom, but to her shock, he didn't touch her. She lay awake all night, waiting, confused. The man who had once been reckless and insatiable now slept peacefully beside her, unmoved. By morning, Kelvin greeted her with breakfast in bed, his usual charm effortless. "Take this," he said, handing her his credit card. "The pin is 2,500, in case you're bored and want to shop." He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Love you, have a good day." And just like that, he was gone. Ngozi sat frozen, the card in her hand, her heart pounding. She had come to end his life. But now she wasn't sure of anything anymore. That evening, Ngozi prepared a steaming pot of Igbo bitter leaf soup for Kelvin. She had expected him to struggle with the soup's rich, bitter taste, but to her surprise, Kelvin loved it. He ate with enthusiasm, pairing each swallow with fufu and even went back for more. "This is amazing," he praised between bites, his eyes lighting up with genuine appreciation. Ngozi blushed, unable to hide her pleasure. She had spent years perfecting her cooking, but seeing Kelvin enjoy it so much stirred something in her. Their conversation flowed naturally, and before they knew it, night had fallen. As they prepared to sleep, Ngozi slipped into a revealing outfit she had purchased earlier from the supermarket. Around her waist, the enchanted beads she had collected from Dibia Agu glinted under the warm glow of the bedroom lights. She didn't need words. Her body language spoke for her. Kelvin understood. This was their first night together, and he wanted to make it unforgettable. Soft music played in the background as Kelvin pulled her close. Their bodies moved as one, and the night became something magical, something neither of them would ever forget. But by morning, reality returned. Ngozi woke before sunrise, quietly slipping out of bed. She had done this before, left without a trace, vanishing like a shadow before the sun could reveal her. But when she reached the door, it wouldn't open. It was locked. Kelvin's voice startled her. "Are you looking for these?" He stood at the foot of the stairs, dangling the keys in his hand. His expression was unreadable. Ngozi clenched her jaw. "Open the door, Kelvin." He didn't move. Instead, his voice softened. "Why won't you let me in? What have I done that you can't forgive?" Ngozi had tried to stay composed, but at his words, something inside her snapped. "You took everything from me, Kelvin," she cried, her voice trembling. "Ada and my mother, they're dead because of you." Kelvin's face drained of color. He had never fully understood the weight of his past actions. Not until now. Seeing the pain in her eyes, the raw grief she had carried alone, shattered him. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Ngozi, I swear, I never meant to hurt you. Please, I'm sorry, but it was too late. I can't be with the person who destroyed my world," she choked out. With a final painful glance, she pulled away from his grip and fled, tears blurring her vision. As she ran through the cold morning air, a deep sorrow settled in her chest. She regretted everything, falling for Kelvin, letting herself care, because she knew Kelvin was going to die that night. She cried until she reached her hotel room, unable to sleep, waiting for morning to come. She had already made up her mind. When the news of Kelvin's death reached her, she would turn herself in to the police. But when her phone rang at dawn, her heart pounded. She expected the police. Instead, it was Kelvin. "Please, forgive me," his voice pleaded through the receiver. "Come back." She had promised herself she would never go back. But in that moment, she realized she couldn't stay away. If Kelvin was truly going to die, she wanted to be there. That night, she lay beside him again, but fear gnawed at her. Every evening, she watched him leave in the morning and return unharmed. Nothing happened. Then, one night, Dibia Agu appeared in her dream. "Why are you troubled, my child?" The old native doctor's voice echoed through the dreamscape. "This is the life your mother and sister wished for you." In the vision, she saw Ada and her mother standing together, smiling at her. They waved goodbye, their faces full of peace. Ngozi shot up from sleep, screaming, "Don't go!" Kelvin woke instantly, pulling her into his arms. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, she believed him. She looked into his eyes and knew he was going to live. And for the first time, she allowed herself to love him. Their wedding was the grandest the town had ever seen, and when Ngozi gave birth to twins, she named them Ada and Ni, honoring the two souls who had never truly left her heart. Most times, not every adversity is meant to destroy us.